Emma Caldwell owned exactly one dress that did not come from a thrift store. And she wore it that Thursday evening with the quiet determination of someone marching into battle. The dress was navy blue, purchased 2 years ago for her cousin's wedding. And it still fit, which she considered her one victory of the month. She pushed through the revolving glass doors of Aurelius, Chicago's most talked about rooftop restaurant, and immediately felt the particular discomfort of being somewhere she did not belong. The ceiling was made of glass.
The alignment of the stars is crucial.
The floor was made of marble.
The text here suggests otherwise.
The waiters moved like they had been trained by the military. Emma straightened her spine and walked forward, reminding herself she was doing this.
The projections show a 15% increase in
Foley,
efficiency.
Impressive. How does this affect our timeline?
We can implement by
called
Q4.
3 hours earlier in a voice
This
that
view is
suggested the building was on fire.
Not as breathtaking as you.
I need you to go to dinner for me
I was
tonight,
hoping you'd say that.
Gwen had said without greeting. What dinner? The blind date I set up through that matchmaking app. The one for Thursday at Aurelius. Emma had stared at her ceiling. Gwen, Aurelius costs $200 per person. I know he is paying. Then why are you not going? Because I just found out he is the man who left a 1-star review on my mother's bakery last spring. The one that said, and I quote, "The croissants tasted like ambition without talent." My mother cried for 3 days, Emma. 3 days. Emma had opened her mouth to say no. Then Gwen had added, "He will be alone and embarrassed if nobody shows up. Just go, eat something nice, and leave after an hour. Tell him I had a family emergency." And that was how Emma Caldwell, a waitress who also ran weekend reading workshops for children at the Lakeview Community Bookshop, found herself standing in front of a hostess who looked like she had never experienced a bad day in her life. "Reservation for Foley," Emma said. The hostess smiled and led her to table 9. Tucked near the glass railing, with a view of the city lights spreading below like fallen stars. Emma sat down, unfolded the napkin onto her lap the way she had seen people do in movies, and waited across the restaurant. Harrison Blake was also waiting, but in the bar area, staring at his phone and wondering how he had ended up there. Harrison Blake was 38 years old, the CEO of Blake Development Group, a company responsible for several of Chicago's most recognizable towers. He wore success the way other people wore weather. It was simply always there, neither remarkable nor something he thought about. But underneath the suits and the board meetings and the rooftop dinners that his social calendar insisted upon, Harrison Blake was deeply, quietly bored with his own life. Patrick Holt, his driver and the man who had worked with him for 9 years, had engineered the evening. "You need to go," Patrick had said that morning, handing him a printed reservation slip with the calm certainty of someone delivering a verdict. "The matchmaking service sent the details last week. You said you would try it once. This is once. I said I would consider trying it once. Consideration is just trying with extra steps. Table 9, 8 o'clock. Harrison arrived at 8 exactly, checked in with the hostess, and was told his guest had already been seated. He walked through the restaurant with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to arriving places and being watched. And he stopped at table 9. The woman sitting there was not what he expected. She was looking out at the city view with an expression of genuine wonder, the kind that people usually hid in places like this because wonder felt too honest. Her dark hair was pulled back simply. Her dress was the color of deep water. She was not performing for the room the way everyone else around him seemed to be. And Harrison found that so unusual it made him pause longer than was polite. Emma turned and saw him standing there. She immediately thought 2 things. First, that he was considerably more handsome than a man who criticized croissants deserved to be. Second, that something in his eyes looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Hi," she said. "You must be the date." Harrison sat down. "And you must be Gwen." "I am," Emma said, which was her first mistake of the evening. The menus arrived. Emma opened hers and felt the familiar panic of prices that belonged in a different dimension. She closed it and set it down carefully, as though it had personally offended her. "Something wrong?" Harrison asked. "Nothing. I am simply decisive." She pointed at a random line when the waiter appeared. Harrison ordered the same thing without looking, which she found oddly endearing for reasons she could not explain. They talked. That was the surprising part. Emma had expected polite silence stretched over expensive food, but Harrison asked her questions that did not sound like interview questions. He asked what she actually liked about the city. She told him about the view from the Lakeview Community Bookshop on Sunday mornings. When the light came through the old windows and the children arrived with their backpacks and their loud opinions about dragons. "You run workshops there?" he asked. "Every weekend? Reading, storytelling, sometimes drawing? Whatever the kids want." "It is not glamorous." "It sounds like the opposite of glamorous," he said. "It sounds real." Something shifted in his voice when he said that word. Real. Like it was something he had been looking for on a map for years without finding it. The food arrived. It was beautiful and tiny. Emma counted the components on her plate and said, "I believe they charged us for the artistic intention as much as the actual ingredients." Harrison looked at his own plate and then, without warning, laughed. A genuine laugh surprised out of him, the kind that did not come with a press release. Emma looked at him sideways. "You seem like a man who does not laugh often." "Seem that way because it is mostly true. What do you do?" Harrison hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Development. Buildings mostly," Emma said. "A builder. Something like that." The evening moved strangely fast after that. They disagreed about whether Chicago pizza was an architectural achievement or a culinary crime. Harrison said it was engineering. Emma said it was comfort food that had lost its way. Neither of them changed their mind, and neither of them minded. When the check came, Harrison placed his card down before Emma could do the mental math she had been quietly performing all evening. She thanked him. He said it was nothing. They walked toward the elevator together, and in the lobby, Emma stopped because she needed to tell him the truth. "I should tell you something," she said. "All right. I am not Gwen. Gwen could not make it. I am Emma. I am her friend. She sent me so you would not be stood up." Harrison looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "My name is Harrison. I was not set up through a matchmaking service. My driver signed me up without telling me and printed the reservation like it was a business directive."
Yes, but the
Emma
text here
stared at
suggests
him.
otherwise.
We
So
must
neither
verify
of
the
us was
sources.
supposed to be here. It seems to be the accurate summary. The doors of Aurelius opened behind them, and the night
The
air
projections
came
show
in,
a 15%
cold and
increase
clean.
in efficiency.
Emma
Impressive.
laughed
How does this
first.
affect our timeline?
We
Then
can implement by
Harrison
Q4.
laughed again, and this time
This
it
view
came
is
easier.
breathtaking.
Like
Not as
something that had been
breathtaking as
stuck
you.
was finally
Yeah.
moving.
I was hoping you'd say
The
that.
food was terrible for the price, Emma said. Genuinely indefensible. Harrison agreed. But the company was not bad. Harrison looked at her in the way that people looked at something they did not expect to want. "No," he said quietly. "It was not bad at all." Emma hailed a cab. Harrison stood on the sidewalk watching it pull away, his hands in his pockets, the city humming around him. Patrick was waiting with the car and did not say a word, which meant he was extremely pleased with himself. Harrison got in and sat in silence for 3 blocks. Then he said, "Her name is Emma." Patrick nodded once. "Good name. She runs reading workshops for children."
Wow, even better.
Harrison looked out the window at the passing lights. Something in his chest felt different than it had 3 hours ago. Lighter and also heavier in a way he could not yet explain, which was the particular feeling of something beginning. Emma did not think about Harrison Blake for the rest of Thursday evening. She thought about him on Friday morning while making coffee. She thought about him on Friday afternoon while organizing the weekend book list. She thought about him on Saturday during the workshop, when a 7-year-old named Rosie declared that all rich people were boring, and Emma had to stop herself from saying that was not entirely true. "You are distracted," said Gwen, appearing in the doorway of the bookshop's back room with 2 cups of tea and the expression of someone who had been waiting to have this conversation all week. "I am not distracted. I am organizing. We've organized that same shelf 4 times since I arrived." Gwen handed her a cup. "Tell me about the dinner," Emma told her.
All of it.
The navy dress, the incomprehensible menu, the tiny food, the laugh she had not expected from a man who carried himself like a closed door. Gwen listened with increasing delight and decreasing guilt about sending her friend to a blind date in her place. "He sounds nothing like someone who would criticize my mother's croissants," Gwen said when Emma finished. "People are usually more than their worst review. You like him. I do not know him. You like what you know. Emma drank her tea and said nothing, which was the loudest confirmation she could have. Given the Lakeview community, Bookshop sat on the corner of a quiet street in a neighborhood that had not yet been noticed by the kind of money that turned old buildings into glass lobbies. It was 3 stories of red brick, built in 1921, filled with secondhand books organized in a system that only the owner, 72-year-old woman named Dorothy Price, fully understood. The ground floor sold books. The second floor hosted community events. The third floor was where Emma ran her weekend workshops, surrounded by child-sized chairs and drawings taped to the walls and the particular smell of old paper and crayons. Emma loved it the way people love things that shaped them. Quietly, completely, and with the specific fear of someone who knows good things do not always last. On Monday morning, that fear became something more concrete. Dorothy called her before 8. Her voice was steady in the way that people's voices go steady when they are delivering news they have been rehearsing. I received a letter on Friday, Dorothy said, from a development company, Blake Development Group. They have acquired the building 2 doors down, and they want this property. The letter says they are planning a mixed-use tower, and our corner is necessary for the foundation footprint. Emma sat down on the edge of her bed. What does that mean exactly? It means they want to buy us out. It means the bookshop would close. Now Dorothy paused. They have given us 60 days to respond. Emma stared at the wall for a long time after the call ended. Blake Development Group. The name settled in her chest like cold water. She thought about Thursday evening. She thought about the way Harrison had said the word real like it was something he missed. She thought about how easy it had been to talk to him, how genuinely he had laughed. And she felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel, which was the specific anger of someone who had trusted their own instincts and been wrong. She went to the bookshop. She read the letter herself. She read it 3 times. Then she sat with Dorothy in the back room, and they made a plan. Because Emma Caldwell had grown up in a neighborhood where plans were the only thing that stood between you and the thing trying to take what mattered. On the other side of the city, Harrison Blake was reading a different set of documents and feeling a discomfort he could not name clearly enough to address. Patrick had placed a folder on his desk that morning. Inside was the standard progress report for the Lakeview Development Project, a tower that the board had approved 6 months ago, a project Harrison had signed off on during a week when 17 other projects were also on his desk, and the Lakeview folder had been one of many. He had trusted the reports. He had approved the acquisition strategy without visiting the site. That was normal. That was how it worked. Except that morning, something made him open the attached photographs. Aerial shots. Street-level images. The corner building circled in red on the site map. Red brick. 3 stories. A sign above the door he could read clearly, even in the photograph. Lakeview Community Bookshop. Harrison put the folder down and picked up his phone. He did not call anyone. He sat very still for 4 minutes, which was unusual for a man who was always moving. And then he did something he almost never did before, a site decision. He drove there himself. Patrick did not ask questions. He navigated through Monday morning Chicago traffic and pulled up across the street from a red brick building on a quiet corner. And Harrison got out and stood on the sidewalk looking at it. A handwritten sign in the window said, Saturday Workshops. All children welcome. Dragons discussed enthusiastically. Below it, a child's drawing of a bookshop with a rainbow over it was taped to the glass. Harrison was still looking at the drawing when the door opened and Emma walked out carrying a box of books. She saw him immediately. The box did not fall, but it tilted, and she caught it and she straightened. And the expression on her face moved through surprise and then something much colder and more controlled. Emma, he said. Mr. Blake, she said. The way she said his last name told him everything. She knew. He crossed the street. She set the box down on the steps and folded her arms, not aggressively, but with the quiet steadiness of someone who had decided how this conversation was going to go before it started. I did not know, he said. Not Thursday night. I did not make the connection until this morning. And now that you have made the connection, I came here. You came here, she repeated. To do what exactly? Harrison looked at the building behind her, at the drawing in the window, at the worn stone steps, and the painted sign, and the particular life that accumulated in a place people genuinely loved. I'm trying to understand. What I signed without understanding it properly, he said. Emma studied him. She was good at reading people. Years of waitressing and workshop running had made her accurate about the distance between what people said and what they meant. Harrison Blake was not performing regret. The discomfort on his face was real, and it cost him something to show it, which made her angrier, not less. Because it would have been easier if he were simply the villain she needed him to be. There are 60 children who come here every weekend, she said. Rosie is 7, and she thinks dragons could be scientifically plausible if the atmosphere were different. Tommy is 9, and he could not read at the start of last year, and now he finishes books in a week. Dorothy has run this place for 40 years, and she is 72 years old, and this building is the reason she gets up in the morning. Harrison said nothing. He was listening in the way that people listen when they know words would be inadequate. Your company sent a letter that gave us 60 days, Emma continued. 60 days, and then what? A glass tower goes up, and Rosie discusses dragons somewhere else, if she finds somewhere else, which most kids in this neighborhood will not, because there is nowhere else. Emma, do not call me that right now, he nodded. You are right not to trust me. I know I am right. But I want to fix this. She looked at him sharply. That is easy to say outside a building you plan to demolish. I know. He looked at the bookshop again. The board has approved a project plan that I signed without standing on this street first. I cannot undo the signature, but I have authority over what happens next. The project is not irreversible yet. What does not irreversible yet mean in real terms? It means I have a board meeting on Wednesday and a decision that is not past the final acquisition stage. You met her eyes. It means there is still time if there is something worth fighting for. Emma was quiet for a moment. The street was calm around them. Ordinary Monday morning sounds. A dog walking past. Someone's radio in an upper window. What would you need? She finally asked. A reason that makes financial and community sense. Something I can put in front of the board that changes the calculation? I have been building a community case for 3 years. Attendance records, program outcomes, letters from families, a proposal for a renovation partnership with the city. I wrote it hoping the city would fund an expansion. I never imagined I would be using it to argue against someone like you. Can I read it? She looked at him for a long time. The anger was still there. It did not go anywhere simply because he was standing on the sidewalk looking genuinely sorry. But underneath the anger was the practical reality that 60 days was not very long, and Harrison Blake was the only person who could actually change the outcome. Come inside, she said finally. Dorothy makes terrible coffee, and you are going to drink it, and you are going to read every page. Harrison followed her up the stone steps and through the door into the warm, book-filled interior of the Lakeview Community Bookshop. Dorothy looked up from behind the counter, assessed him in approximately 3 seconds with the precision of a woman who had lived long enough to be accurate about people, and poured him a cup of coffee without being asked. It was, as advertised, quite terrible. Harrison drank it without complaint and read every page of Emma's proposal while she watched him from across the reading table, her own cup in her hands. Waiting, he read slowly. He asked questions that were specific and practical. He wrote notes in the margins of his own notepad. He read certain sections twice, and gradually across the table, covered in Emma's 3 years of careful documentation, something shifted in the room. Not forgiveness, not yet, and not trust, which had to be built rather than declared, but the beginning of something that had not existed an hour ago, which was the possibility that the story did not have to end the way the letter had suggested. At one point, Rosie came in with her father for a book return and spotted Emma at the table. She waved enthusiastically, noticed Harrison, studied him with the directness of a child who has not yet learned to pretend, and said, "Are you the serious man who is going to take our bookshop?" The room went very still. Harrison looked at Rosie. Then he looked at Emma. Then he looked back at Rosie and said, "I am trying very hard not to be." Rosie considered this answer with great seriousness. Okay, she said. But if you do, you should know that this is where I found out dragons could be real. So it matters. I know, Harrison said. I am beginning to understand that it does. Rosie's father took her hand and steered her gently toward the door. But Rosie looked back once more with the evaluating expression of someone reserving judgment. When they were gone, the bookshop was quiet again. Emma was looking at Harrison with something that was not quite softened, but was no longer entirely closed. Wednesday is 2 days away, she said. I know. Is that enough time? Harrison looked at the proposal in front of him, at the drawings on the walls, at the shelves of books organizing themselves according to Dorothy's private logic, at the place that Emma loved the way he had forgotten people could love things. I do not know, he said honestly, but I am going to try. And that, Emma thought, setting down her terrible coffee, was the most real thing he had said since he walked through the door. The board meeting at Blake's development group occupied the 42nd floor of a building Harrison had designed 7 years ago. Back when he still cared about the angle of light through glass and the way a lobby could make a person feel, is either welcomed or diminished. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows and a table long enough to seat. 14 people who all currently looked at Harrison with varying degrees of confusion and carefully concealed irritation. Diane Mercer, the head of the acquisitions board, sat to his left with a leather folder and the expression of someone who had already decided the outcome of a conversation before it began. She was 60 years old, precise, and had never once in Harrison's experience made a decision that was not first filtered through a profit margin.
The Lakeview acquisition is on schedule, Diane said,
opening the meeting with the efficiency of someone who considered pleasantries a waste of square footage. Final contracts go to legal by Friday. Demolition planning begins in 3 weeks. Harrison placed his own folder on the table. I would like to propose a pause. Diane looked at him the way people look at weather forecasts that contradict what they can see through the window. A pause. A review of the site assessment and an alternative development model. The room shifted. 13 people adjusted their posture in 13 slightly different ways that all communicated the same thing, which was that this was unexpected and therefore unwelcome. Harrison, said Diane, using his first name the way people do when they want to remind you that they have known you long enough to be disappointed. The Lakeview project has been in planning for 8 months. The Community Impact Report was filed in March. I read the Community Impact Report this morning, Harrison said. It assessed the neighborhood as underutilized mixed residential. It did not mention that the building we intend to demolish serves over 300 people weekly, runs educational programs for children, and has been a neighborhood institution for 40 years. Those details do not change the land value. They change what we are actually doing. Diane set down her pen. The room got quieter. Outside the windows, Chicago spread itself in every direction under a gray November sky. What are you proposing? She asked. Harrison opened his folder and slid copies down the table. Patrick had helped him print them at 6 in the morning. Quietly and without commentary, in the particular way Patrick did everything, which was to say efficiently and with loyalty that asked for nothing. A revised tower footprint that shifts the foundation 12 meters north. The bookshop building is preserved. We incorporate it as a community anchor into the development rather than replacing it. The city has a heritage partnership program that provides tax relief for exactly this kind of integration. He had spent Tuesday night on the phone with the city planner. A favor called in from 3 years ago that he was glad he had never used until now. The revised model loses approximately 4% of the towers, retail floor space, and gains a heritage designation that increases. The overall developments appeal to the residential market we are actually trying to attract. Diane picked up the document. She read, the room read. Harrison waited, which was something he was not naturally good at, but had been practicing since Monday morning. Where did this come from? Diane asked without looking up. I visited the site. If you visited the site yourself. I did. She looked up now. Her expression had not softened exactly, but it had changed in some small technical way, like a lock that has not opened, but has been touched by the right key, the 4%. loss in retail space, she said, is offset by the heritage tax relief in year 1 and by the residential premium in years 2 through 5. Harrison had run the numbers twice. He had also had Jade from the finance team run them independently, because he wanted to be sure he was not constructing an argument out of hope rather than fact. Diane tapped the document. The room waited. Outside, a plane crossed the gray sky in complete indifference to what was happening on the 42nd floor. I want finance to review the revised model by Thursday, Diane said finally. If the numbers hold, we proceed with the alternative footprint. It was not a yes. But in the language of board meetings, it was the door opening. Harrison drove to Lakeview that afternoon. He had not told Emma he was coming because he did not know until the meeting ended what he would have to report, and he had not wanted to offer her hope before he knew if it was real. She was on the front steps when he arrived, sitting with a cup of coffee and a book open in her lap, though she was not reading it. She looked up when his car stopped across the street, and she watched him cross toward her with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to read outcomes too early. "How did it go?" she asked. Harrison sat down on the step beside her. It was a cold afternoon. The street was quiet. From inside the bookshop came the muffled sound of Dorothy talking to a customer about the organizational logic of the biography section, which was apparently arranged by the emotional temperament of the subject rather than alphabetically. "The board is reviewing a revised proposal," he said. "Alternative footprint. The bookshop stays. Finance reviews the numbers by Thursday." Emma was very still for a moment. "And if the numbers hold, then we build around you instead of over you." She looked at the street in front of them. A woman walked past with a stroller. 2 pigeons conducted a dispute near the opposite curb. The ordinary city going about its ordinary business in complete ignorance of what had just shifted on this particular corner. "You actually did it," Emma said quietly. "I tried to do it. Thursday will tell us if it worked." "You stood in that room and changed the plan?" "I stood in that room and presented an argument. Diane Mercer changed the plan, or she is considering changing it, which is as far as we have gotten." Emma turned to look at him. He was sitting close enough that she could see the tiredness around his eyes. That had not been their Thursday evening at Aurelius. The tiredness of 2 days of work that had mattered rather than simply proceeded. "Why did you do this?" she asked. Not accusingly, genuinely. Harrison thought about the honest answer, which he had been practicing in the car on the way over, because he had known she would ask, and he had wanted to be ready. "Because I signed something without understanding it," he said. "And when I understood it, I could not leave it the way it was." "That is the straightforward part." He paused. "The less straightforward part is that I have been running a company for 11 years and making decisions that affect people I never meet. And I had convinced myself that was simply how it worked. That the distance was necessary and the reports were sufficient. And then I stood on this street and saw a drawing of a bookshop with a rainbow over it taped to a window. And I could not make the distance work anymore." Emma was quiet. The pigeons resolved their dispute. A child on a bicycle went past, ringing the bell for no reason except that ringing bicycle bells is one of the great underrated joys available to human beings. "You know," Emma said, "Gwen is going
The
to take
alignment of
full
the stars
credit
is
for this."
crucial.
Yes, but the text
Harrison
here
looked at
suggests
her.
otherwise.
We must
For what?
verify the sources.
"For sending me to that dinner. She's going to say she planned the whole thing. Did she?"
The projections show a 15% increase in efficiency.
Impressive. How does this affect our timeline?
We can implement
Emma
by
smiled
Q4.
for the first time that
This
afternoon.
view is breathtaking.
Small and real.
Not as breathtaking as
So
you.
no.
Come here.
She absolutely
hoping
did
you'd
not
say that.
plan it, and yet here we are. Emma agreed. Thursday came with the particular slowness of days that contained something important at the end of them. Emma ran the workshop in the morning and tried not to check her phone excessively, with limited success. Rosie arrived and immediately asked whether the serious man had fixed everything yet. Emma said they were waiting to find out. Rosie considered this and said that waiting was the worst part of most things, which Emma thought was among the more accurate observations she had heard recently. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Harrison called. Emma stepped into the hallway and answered on the second ring. "The numbers held," he said. She leaned against the wall. From the workshop room, she could hear Tommy reading aloud to the group, his voice slow and careful and proud in the way it got when he was managing a difficult sentence. The numbers held, she repeated. Finance approved the revised model. Diane called it a creative solution, which from Diane is approximately equivalent to a standing ovation from anyone else. The alternative footprint is official as of an hour ago. The bookshop stays. Emma pressed her free hand flat against the wall because she needed something solid. Emma. I am here, she said. I just needed a second. Take as many as you want. She took 3. Then she walked back into the workshop room and stood in the doorway and looked at 11. Children sitting in small chairs around a table covered in books and drawings. At Rosie arguing passionately with a boy named Felix about whether a dragon that breathed ice was more or less scientifically plausible than one that breathed fire. At Tommy holding his book with both hands and reading a sentence that 6 months ago would have defeated him. Good news? Gwen asked, appearing at her shoulder. Very good news. Gwen looked at her face and then hugged her without further questions, which was one of the things Emma valued most about Gwen, the ability to understand when words were unnecessary. That evening, Harrison came by the bookshop after closing time. Dorothy let him in and handed him a cup of coffee without ceremony, which Emma had started to understand was Dorothy's highest form of acceptance. They sat at the reading table with the proposal spread between them, going through the revised development plans, talking about what the partnership between the bookshop and the new building could look like. Whether the community room on the second floor could be expanded, whether the city heritage funding could cover the cost of repairing the third-floor windows that had been drafty since 2019. It was practical and detailed and not remotely romantic except that it was, in the way that 2 people sitting across a table, working on something that matters to both of them, is always romantic in the truest sense of the word. At some point, Dorothy said goodnight from the doorway and told them to lock up when they left. And then the bookshop was quiet around them, the shelves full and the lights warm and the street outside settling into evening. Can I ask you something? Harrison said, depending on the question. What was the first book you loved? Emma looked at him. It was not the question she had expected. Where the Wild Things Are, she said. I read it so many times the cover fell off. My mother taped it back with masking tape, and I thought that was the best repair job in history. What did you love about it? The boy goes somewhere wild and difficult, and then he comes home and his dinner is still warm. She thought about it. The idea that you could go all the way to the hardest place and still come back and find warmth waiting. I found that very comforting at 7 years old. Harrison looked at the table. I think I need to read more books. I think you have come to the right place for that. He looked up and the expression on his face was the same one she had noticed at Aurelius. The one underneath the suit and the title and the practiced ease. The one that was simply a person who had been looking for something real and was startled to find it. Emma, he said. Yes. I would like to take you to dinner again. A real dinner this time, where I tell you who I am before we sit down. And you tell me who you are. And we order something that is actually food. Emma considered the offer with the appropriate seriousness it deserved. Outside, the city hummed its ordinary song. Inside, the bookshop held its breath around them in the patient way that old buildings do. Having seen enough human decisions to know when one matters.
Autumn.
Whispers, she said. Absolutely not. And no menus written in a language designed to intimidate. Somewhere with actual portion. Sizes. Then yes, Emma said. I think I would like that. Harrison smiled. The full version this time, unguarded and unhurried. The kind that had taken most of the evening to arrive and was worth every minute of the wait. And in the warm quiet of the Lakeview Community Bookshop, surrounded by 40 years of Dorothy's organizational logic and 11 children's drawings, and the particular smell of old paper and possibility, something that had started at the wrong table in the right restaurant finished becoming itself, which is the way most true things begin and the best of them end.